So I will let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Laura and Trish, and hi to everybody. I see some familiar faces on the call, and I know Monica and I will be meeting, I think, next week. Or it's always just good when you enter each other's orbit, as I like to say. We'll start seeing a lot more of each other, hopefully. So, again, I am Brianne Sanchez. I am Director of Nonprofit Relations at the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines. And it is my pleasure to share with you a little bit more about the Community Foundation. Oh, personal professional win. I am joining the Des Moines Public Library Foundation Board this year, which is kind of like a both for me because Catlin, love the shout out on the reading challenge. And I'm a big reader and, personally love the library. When I moved to Des Moines in '07, the first thing I looked up was how many libraries we had. And since we have 6, I was like, okay, this is the place for me. And so that's kind of personally exciting. And then professionally, I work with a lot of obviously nonprofit boards, and I feel like the more I can experience where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, I can have the best practices and the books and the tools and resources. But as you all know, nonprofits are messy, and so living those board experiences and challenges is going to be really helpful for me. So, my joy today will be sharing with you first a little bit more about the Community Foundation and what we do, and then I'll move into some kind of emerging themes or trends that we're seeing in the sector through our conversation. So, and I see Trish has put some things in the chat. So, looking forward to just giving you a chance to read that real quick while I set up my screen share. And let me know, can you see like my whole presentation view and everything with my notes? Okay, I can never know when I go to do slideshows on Zoom if you can see everything. Or let's see, I'm going to stop share and try and get up the version that I want you to see, because it won't be fun if you can read all my notes. All right, let's see. Does that give you my notes too, or nope? Okay, good. Wonderful. Well, thank you again for inviting me today. So, I'll first start by sharing the mission of the Community Foundation. Our mission is to improve the quality of life for all by promoting charitable giving, connecting donors with causes they care about, and providing leadership on important community issues. And you'll hear us say all the time, we are better together. So there are a lot of different foundations out in the world, and community foundations really support the distinct needs of the community. Um, we have a really broad base of interests, everything from arts and culture, health, recreation, human services. So we exist to really improve the quality of life in the community. We have over $500 million in assets under administration, and annually you'll see us that we grant out more than $50 million. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the difference between our competitive grants and our donor advised funds in a little bit. But that's a testament, those numbers are a testament to really the charitable nature of our community. So, we really, when I talk about the Community Foundation, I describe us kind of like a charitable bank. So we work with donors. Those could be individuals and families. They could be corporations and businesses. They could even be kind of community betterment projects where they need somewhere to hold the money for the project. They could be even nonprofit organizations who hold their endowments with us. So we hold money for charitable purposes at the Community Foundation. And the moment that that money is given to us from donors is the charitable moment. So they get the tax receipt from the Community Foundation. And then what we like to say though is that they give through the community foundation. So the idea is that these funds will then go out and support nonprofit organizations. Um, Let me share a little bit more about how those work. So donor advised funds, again, we'll talk a little bit about how those assets, not just cash, can come into the community foundation. Donors grant the money out then to their favorite charities, hopefully making an impact on the communities they serve. So the point of difference really, donor advised funds are something that you could have with a Fidelity, or it's a financial instrument. The differentiator for us is that at the community foundation, when we have the opportunity to hold and invest those funds, we're also doing the work to build relationships with the nonprofit community and understand the kind of projects that you all have, so that we can kind of play matchmaker with our donors. And we do that kind of one-on-one and interpersonal ways, and then I'll share a little bit about another tool that we developed. But really, we are uniquely yours, and working with our donors, really look to try and keep as much of those charitable funds in Iowa, in Des Moines, as we can. So another way that that folks partner with us for their strategic charitable giving is through these different kinds of tools that we have. So a lot of times people think that you have to be super wealthy to have a fund at the community foundation. I will say that there's really not a minimum if you want to be strategic and be part of what we do. I opened a seed fund at the community foundation before I worked here. I was a groupie, I like to say, of the community foundation, and I opened a seed fund to really celebrate living in Des Moines for 10 years. And my goal is to give into that fund annually, and then I'm able to grant out of that fund once I reach $10,000. So for me, as a young professional, really kind of trying to embrace different methods of community leadership, partnering with the Community Foundation on a seed fund, I call it my charitable 401k. I'm giving money in, that's being invested through the Community Foundation, kind of with all of our assets. And then hopefully in 5-10 years down the road, when I've amassed that total amount, I'll be able to really make a major gift, or a life-changing gift that is much more than what I'm able to do on an annual basis with sort of my more responsive giving to community needs. So personal example there, but just wanted to say that really the Community Foundation exists for anybody who wants to be intentional or strategic about their giving. We work with financial advisors, and we have a charitable investment partners program. So we're really trying to promote philanthropy as people are thinking about their wealth. We're part of the Endow Iowa program, which I'm hoping to play a little video on here in a minute. Hopefully, we'll get to that. We have legacy funds and Keep Iowa Growing funds. So partnering really on some of the other assets that folks have, to really utilize those for charitable giving. So we can take in a lot of different kinds of gifts. Real estate, property, retirement plans. There's something called an IRA rollover, that some smaller nonprofits really just don't have the capacity to take in, gifts of stock, gifts of grain, even. And so, as a partner for those nonprofit organizations, we can really work with your major donors to bring those assets in for charitable purposes, and help to advance your mission. So if you don't have the capacity to work with donors, but they might want to set up an endowment for your organization, or you really need some help navigating some of these non-cash gift types, that's an opportunity to reach out to the Community Foundation. And we have a charitable giving team side of the house that is extremely knowledgeable, much more knowledgeable than I am. This is not my forte on this side, in how to work with organizations looking to take these kinds of funds in. So as I mentioned, I'm going to try and play a video, and I'm going to pause and see if you can hear. Can you hear the video? No? Okay. I'm going to stop the share and pull it out on YouTube. Let's try this. So you can learn a little bit more about how Endow Iowa works. Oops. Yesterday we did our board basics training, and I was like so all over doing the Zoom share sound, optimized for video. I thought I could just do it super easily today, but not happening. All right, let's see. Here we go.
Know that you get more. The generous spirit of Iowans is evident across our state. We know that you get more when you give to make our communities better together. To build and grow this spirit of charitable giving, the Endow Iowa Tax Credit Program was created. When you give to an Endow Iowa fund at your local community foundation, you get a 25% state tax credit in appreciation of your generosity. It's a win-win. Think of it this way. You've provided a gift to a local nonprofit every year, but you want to find a way to make sure this organization has your support forever. By making a gift to their Endow Iowa Fund, the organization will benefit from your support each year while you receive a 25% state tax credit as a thank you for investing in the future of our state. An Endow Iowa Fund can also be established by individuals, families, or businesses to ensure the Iowa nonprofits and communities you care about have the right ingredients to be successful now and for years to come. Choosing the gift to give to an Endow Iowa Fund is just like picking your favorite flavor. There are a variety of options including cash, real estate, farmland, stock, and retirement assets. You can also mix it up and create a combination to best meet your taste. Endow Iowa tax credits are available on a first-come, first-served basis until each year's tax credits are claimed. Donors interested in Endow Iowa should consult with their tax advisors to learn more about how they can share the sweetness of giving back for generations to come. It's easy as, well, pie.
So that video hopefully gives you a sense of some of the non-cash gift types and some of the benefits of partnering with the community foundation to discuss these options. We know there are some really different sophisticated ways for your donors to give, and that's where we come in and we want to help to enable you to receive those gifts. So
State.
whoop,
We know that you get more when you give to
I'm
make.
gonna pause this again. See if we can pull up the right slides here for you to keep going. All right. Let's see.
Better together.
All right. Are you seeing? Let's see. I've lost the video. Can somebody chat with me and let me know if you're seeing the PowerPoint slides with the notes or not? Or somebody just use your voice because I lost it.
We're not seeing your notes. We just see the
Okay.
screen.
Great, wonderful. So thank you. I'm just going to kind of go through. So one of the ways that we connect donors with causes that they care about is really our one-on-one meetings with donors and families to learn more about, what motivates them to give, where are their interest areas of passion that they want to make an impact. And our goal is really to help people to have a legacy through philanthropy and through their charitable giving. And as I mentioned before, just be really intentional about it. So we do that with those personal conversations. And then we also have a website called GiveDSM. So if your organization isn't on GiveDSM yet, that's kind of one of the action items or takeaways I'd encourage you to pursue as we wrap up later this morning. This is an opportunity to put your funding needs in front of not only our donors, but also the broader community. So at risk, I'm going to pull up our GiveDSM site at risk of losing our PowerPoints again. But I think it'll be really kind of cool to explore a little bit with you what's on that site specifically. And so I'll show you, you can post, a $10,000 goal, $75,000 goal, really, what we would recommend is having some general operating sort of evergreen project on there, and then some more specific initiatives that you're looking to raise funds for. So you'll see that you can go in and make a gift, or donors can go in and make a gift through their credit card, or they can give from their community foundation fund. So this is open to the public or our fund holders. And we really look at this site before we have those family conversations as well. And donors can really sort by various kinds of opportunities. So you can see we have timely needs, capital campaigns, general support, and then all of these other categories on here. So I would encourage you to just take a little bit of time to put a couple of projects on GiveDSM if you haven't already. Our competitive grants are very competitive, and this is a great opportunity to really leverage the other 50 million that comes out of the community foundation if they can know about what your needs are. So we will go back to this PowerPoint, and you can see competitive grant making up on the screen. Is that right?
We
Okay.
have the presenter view, so we see your notes,
This is where it never goes right for
and it's
me.
on the first slide.
Okay. All right. Resume the slideshow here. Let's see. I should have gotten a little help, but
I think you're doing great.
normally I have a awesome team member who helps me stay on task here. Okay, let's see. You still seeing my notes?
Nope, we just see the slideshow now.
Okay, great. So competitive grant making, outside of GiveDSM, we do have two programs. And actually today at noon, we are releasing our priorities for 2021. So we will have all of that information up on our site later today. But I'll share a little bit more about those programs. So we have our leadership grants is kind of what we're known for. In normal times, we call them projects that have a tidal wave of community impact. You might recognize projects like the skate park, which I think I saw is just going to be opening on May 22nd, so mark your calendar. That's an example of a leadership grant that was made really 10 years ago with this visionary project in mind. And then last year, we contributed funding for the Central Iowa Water Trails. So a lot of those quality of life community betterment projects that are visible, and you may have seen our mural out downtown that really depicts a lot of those projects. But then there are some really transformational projects that we've invested in that are not as visible in the community, but just as important. So you'll see Orchard Place logo on here, and that's an example of a project where we were investing in children's crisis mental health planning initiatives, bringing folks around the table to advance that. We've invested in projects like the centralized intake for Polk County unsheltered folks in our community to really have one place where they can reach out, and then we can take in and triage and figure out where they might be able to find shelter instead of having to call shelter after shelter to see if they are eligible or if there's space for them. So those are a couple of examples. I think, last year we pivoted our leadership grants to do focus on really more of a COVID response and disaster recovery fund. We really seeded our community's disaster recovery fund last year. This year, I think, we'll have a combination of looking forward at both community strengthening and sector strengthening initiatives. So we might see less investment in those capital projects that we have been known for in the past this year as we look at resiliency of the community, and a little bit more in some of these programs and initiatives that help vulnerable populations. And then our other competitive grant making program is capacity building grants. And so those are for projects that advance the governance and management of a nonprofit organization. Typically, they've gone up to $5,000 because it's been really focused around strategic planning support for one organization in particular. And we're really expanding that this year in response to COVID to allow multiple partners to come together around an issue. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that might look like with asset mapping and strategic alliances when I get into the trends. Then I wanted to share a little bit more about our trainings and convenings. So many of you who I recognize have been on our community circle conversations, and those are on the first Wednesday of the month from 8:30 to 9:30. So if you have these Wednesday mornings open and you'd like to join us, those are free and an opportunity to do some learning in the sector and then really connect and continue to build relationships. We also host the Central Iowa Funders Forum, which is a monthly meeting of grant makers in Central Iowa who come together to better understand, what are the challenging issues that our community is facing, and how can we as grant makers really coordinate our response. We also host on our site employment listings and a nonprofit consultant database. I get lots of requests for salary benchmarking information, so you can feel free to reach out to me for those kinds of needs. We also have a nonprofit resource library with physical books that you can get in-house, or I have a lot of digital tools and resources that I can share. We launched this year a LinkedIn network that is another way to kind of get that peer-to-peer support. And we continue to have one-on-one conversations with nonprofit leaders. I mentioned GiveDSM and kind of showed you around that site, which is a great asset for you to get your funding needs in front of our donors. And then we do have about 40 different regional affiliates around the state of Iowa that we help administer their community foundation supports. So we're really focused in Greater Des Moines with the community foundation and our competitive grant making, but we have an infrastructure here in Central Iowa that really expands throughout the state. So that's what I wanted to share about the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines. And thank you for listening and indulging me. I had mentioned I was a groupie of the organization before I joined on staff and had a seed fund at the Community Foundation. But really, it took coming here and working at the foundation to understand, really the broad scope of how the Community Foundation partners with both donors and nonprofits. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about, or kind of overview, is this idea of emerging themes and trends for the nonprofit sector. And I think that's where Trish and Laura had invited me to share for all of you. So I wish that I could say that I have a crystal ball and I could forecast, what 2021 is going to look like for the nonprofit community. But if the last year has taught us anything, it's that really there are a lot of different possible futures. And so where I'm focusing today is really around some some of the emerging themes and trends. So we've been having really dozens of meetings with nonprofit leaders over the past year. And what I wanted to do was sort of distill what I'm hearing both from, nonprofit EDs and board chairs, and also from foundation leaders as well. And we'll kind of walk through some of these emerging themes and trends, or all of them that I have here. And then I'd love to, have some opportunity for Q&A or dialogue, or, anything that you would need follow-up help navigating. So really, in 2021, what we're expecting is that charitable nonprofits will continue to be limited in resources. There will continue to be increased demands stemming from increased needs in the communities. And there's a growing awareness that every nonprofit board member needs to be an active, vocal advocate for his or her nonprofit's mission, and to affect policies in the community and at a national level. We'll talk a little bit more about that last piece in the advocacy section. So one thing that I wanted to just say is, this is always evolving, but again, these are just kind of trends that we have heard and seen. So accountability, what do I mean by that? There are, as we've seen with this summer's racial justice uprisings, really a wake-up call for many in the sector that we need to do more to advance racial justice. And this goes way beyond board diversity, although that can really be a starting point for your organization. There's an excellent resource for the sector, Equity in the Center. They have Awake to Woke to Work, which is a framework for understanding, where is your nonprofit on the racial justice journey, and what kind of actions does your organization need to take to better embrace equity. So what we really want is for equity to be more than a buzzword, but to be something that is considered at active decision points for your organization. So one of the tools that we have, or that I've shared on the screen here, is the For Equity tool. And for those of you who've been part of Community Foundation conversations in the past, we love to share this tool as just one example of some questions that you can ask at those key decision points. And Angie Detlef-Stretton, our Chief Community Impact Officer, she is part of the Social Capital Crossroads leadership, and they will come in to your nonprofit organization board meeting and really give a presentation about how to better leverage equity in decision making. So thinking about, authentic engagement with various ethnic communities as you're moving through a process. Is there a group that benefits more than another because of this decision? What could be one unintended consequence of the process or decision for ethnic communities and communities of color? And what action will be implemented to advance equity in the process or decision? So those are just a few. They seem like simple questions, but they can generate a lot of great conversation at your nonprofit board meetings and those key decision points. So I love the example that Nick gave earlier in the intros about the work that he's doing as part of the Roosevelt High School Foundation Board, and really opportunities to center equity and better support our community members. So a great example there. And I think, this is where organizations are going to continue to be held accountable. I have environmental justice on here as well. As climate change continues to emerge as an issue, and as many corporate funders are looking at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as part of guiding where they're giving their corporate money, because it's tied to ESG scores. And so that's what their shareholders are looking at. That might be a factor in how their grant making is going to change to make sure that, and climate change is just one part of the SDGs, but that might be something to really go out and look at if you haven't yet looked at those goals. So, another common theme from the pandemic and the conversation that we've been having with executive directors is really that the pandemic has encouraged them to pull to the core of what they do. An example of that would be, the Science Center of Iowa. And they talked a lot about how they had to really place their staff at different points throughout the museum so that they could encourage proper social distancing and make sure that things were wiped down more frequently. And those higher touch points really helped them to better understand ways that they could increase operational effectiveness. So I think those themes and lessons from human centered design that's been really popular over the past couple of years, thinking about how are you designing your programs for that end user, will also be informed by some of these business, lean Six Sigma ideas around operational effectiveness. So when we talk about accountability, those are a couple of the ways that organizations are going to be held accountable. And I think also, we'll talk a little bit about finances, but with the rise of racial justice, there have been a lot more peer giving, mutual aid types of organizations. So there are calls for accountability around nonprofits, and the money that they spend on really operating an organization. So I think donors are getting savvy about that, and we need to be able to talk about why strong nonprofits have to invest in sort of their general operating structures too. So that kind of ties into advocacy as another key component. We know that we're not going to be able to simply grant or program our way out of systemic inequities. There needs to be really a concerted effort on behalf of the nonprofit sector to lean into advocacy in new ways. So at the beginning in introductions, talking about PPP, Save Our Stages, and really when some of that recovery was emerging, the nonprofit sector was being left out. We're all sometimes so nose down on our particular programs and kind of meeting the needs that are right in front of us. It can be difficult to expend the time needed to advocate at a larger level. If that's something that your organization feels like you need to get involved in, a great resource is the National Council of Nonprofits. They have an advocacy newsletter that they send out at least once a month, and they've been putting out some really great information around nonprofit recovery and relief post COVID. So that's one I would recommend subscribing to. I know we have Conmigo on the call today, and United Way of Central Iowa locally has been doing a lot. They put out an advocacy agenda every year, and I know that early childhood is one of the key goals, support for early childhood. And so, being part of that larger voice, there's a call. We're on the ground working with people who are impacted by public policy every day. And so, how can you help translate the experiences that your families, your individuals are having on the ground to our legislators so that we can get upstream on some of these issues, and really you're responding to surge capacity or to surge need for these human services in a lot of ways. And so that's a really important component. I know, we had somebody from the zoo, and the arts and culture sector has been incredibly impacted. And so we talked with several arts and culture EDs over the past couple of weeks, and what did it take to get Save Our Stages passed? It it took a really concerted coalition of organizations advocating for that kind of relief. I will say also that I've heard with the PPP second round that you would not be eligible for Save Our Stages if you received that new PPP funding. So something to look into there as well. An example of a coalition that we have invested in over the past year through our grant making is the Iowa ACES 360 group. So that's a group coming together around adverse childhood experiences and various excuse me elements of policy that can help children and families in central Iowa thrive. So if you're looking for ways to better engage your board members, really look at advocacy and how they can lean in as ambassadors, come up with some key areas that impact your organization and partner to make some change. Next, I'll talk a little bit about sustainability. Excuse me, Trish, I think I'm experiencing some of that voice loss that you had. So thanks for sticking with me here. So here are some trends kind of on the financial sustainability side, and then we'll talk a little bit about leadership sustainability. So a trend that we're seeing is nonprofits really looking at instituting more monthly giving campaigns, membership models, or really using that monthly giving push to help with donor retention over time. So if your organization really doesn't have a strategy around monthly giving, that might be one area to explore over the next year. Signing folks up to give to you and be connected with you on an ongoing basis. For organizations that are more grassroots, this might feel a little bit out of the box, but I'm seeing a lot around artificial intelligence for donor retention. So there's a lot of work that goes into stewarding donors and a lot of effort. And so how can we use advances in technology to help us? That's going to be, I think, a trend emerging. Peer-to-peer giving campaigns. We've all seen, I'm sure, those Facebook campaigns that, for somebody's birthday that they post for a nonprofit cause. So are you creating a toolkit to help your supporters, your board, your ambassadors and champions to really leverage some of those peer-to-peer giving tools to support your organization? At the Community Foundation, you can imagine that we also have an emphasis on planned gifts and having conversations with some of your donors who might look to leave money to your organization as part of their will or estate. And so those conversations, there's a Mid-Iowa Planned Giving Council. That might be a great networking group if you aren't part of that. That could be a good opportunity to plug into that planned giving. Oop, and I'm noticing here too, I'm not doing a good job of advancing these slides. So I talked about advocacy. Sorry about that. This is what happens when I'm in two screens here. And then sustainability, I'll pull that up. So with planned gifts, I talked a little bit about that, and then corporate foundation. So shared the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals a little bit. Corporations are some of them are shifting in how they're giving. I worked in a corporate foundation for a year before coming to the community foundation, and it can be challenging to maybe streamline those goals, and then that might change some longstanding partnerships with nonprofits in the community. So really better understanding where are the goals of those corporate funders who you've partnered with, if you have those relationships going, and having those conversations and kind of forecasting that out, because again, depending on if they're publicly or privately held, they might have other pressures to shift their giving strategy to align more with some of those sustainable development goals. So how can you position your organization to have those longstanding relationships and maintain them? Another key factor in sustainability that we talk about is leadership. So, employee and volunteer retention is so important for nonprofits to continue to meet their mission. What we've seen throughout the pandemic is, quite frankly, a lot of burnout. And so, I don't know if you've experienced this at your organization. Um, but really, financial stability is not the only metric that you should be looking at. What does your talent look like to help you meet your mission? How are you keeping and investing in your employees and volunteers to keep them engaged? So, one of our grant programs, the capacity building grants, as I have described, we really focus on those kinds of planning efforts. So, if your organization needs to think about succession planning, building out that talent pipeline, HR planning, that might be a fit for capacity building. We've seen some organizations emerge with more shared leadership models. I think that's a trend that we might see instead of having a singular CEO. I have some information out of Compass Point about how nonprofits might be leading away from some of that hierarchy. We'll go then also to talk about connectivity. So, I have an example here on the screen, and I loved hearing when we were all introducing ourselves, folks were sharing different strategic partnerships that they had. So it was really great to hear, St. Vincent de Paul partnering or thinking about how they could partner with another organization, and hearing from Ronald McDonald House about what that partnership with the hospital system has meant for them. And really, very few effective nonprofits exist in a vacuum aside from other strategic partners. When we talk about connectivity, even from the beginning stages of people who are thinking about starting an organization, one of the first questions we ask or activities that we encourage is to do an environmental scan. Who is aligned or doing some work with the same population or aligned with your mission? Get to know them, build relationships with them. We know that many organizations were struggling before the pandemic, but for whom some of the relief honestly offered a reprieve to keep the lights on. Others took advantage of paused programming to think strategically about the future and redesign their delivery, or advance future projects, or reimagine organizational structures. So I have a couple of examples there. Um, One example that we talked to recently was really interesting, was talking to Hoyt Sherman Place. And so you can imagine they have been completely shuttered as a result of COVID. They bring in some terrific headliners to our community, and you would think they would just completely have to go, dormant for a year. But they were actually able to leverage some of the downtime that they had. Not bringing in uh, concerts or performances, and fast tracked another what's the word, like a remodeling of more of their historic area. And they they were saying that they even leveraged their staff to do some of the demolition. It's like, oh my gosh, you guys could have sold tickets so that folks could use sledgehammers and get out all of their COVID anger to help you with that. But that was just a really exciting project to hear about, because they had just finished a capital campaign for improvements, and they said their strategy was to go back to some of those key donors and say, if you give just 10% more, you will enable us to weather this time by fast tracking this other planned priority that we had for 2 years down the road. We can take care of it right now. So I just love that story as an example of really the ingenuity of our sector. Another example I have on the screen here is Can Play. And so Opportunity on Deck and Courage League Sports were two organizations, and you may have seen a little bit in the news about their merger, but working with youth and people with disabilities on sports related and leadership programming. And they really had a pause in what they were able to do during COVID. So instead of throwing in the towel, so to speak, they started to really open up a dialogue with each other. And what began as co locating and early conversations turned to a full on merger. So now they just emerged this month as Can Play, and we supported some of that merger work through some grant making that we did over the past year. So when we talk about strategic partnerships, strategic alignments, a lot of times nonprofits get concerned thinking about winners and losers, and really we have some great examples of organizations that took a pause, brought together their boards and thought, how can we put the mission first, and emerge more successful on better footing, a better play, a stronger playing field, if you will, than before the pandemic. So I think that's a really cool example. And oh, sorry, I'll pause there.
I just missed who merged for the Can
Um,
Play.
sure, it was Opportunity on Deck and
Okay.
Courage League Sports.
Okay. I thought it looked Courage League wise, but I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, they did a really cool thing with their logo where it's like a mashup, but it looks, so natural there. And we had them, both of the leaders, Dylan and Melissa, on a community circle conversation last month, talking about how they navigated that together and really what those facilitated conversations looked like. And they're taking a page from the technology sector playbook, and they're co-founders of this new organization, because we were like, okay, who's going to be the ED? And so that was just a really cool example. And I have, recordings of that conversation if that's something any of you are interested in and follow up. But, we know that there are organizations out there. Some of them are, hugely historic players in our community who are needing to explore some sort of strategic alignment. And I think, that's why we've really increased our capacity building cap to be 25,000 this year. So that we can provide funding for those explorations to happen, those facilitated conversations that can take some of the emotion and drama out of a merger and really help to put that mission first, and keep those services in our community. So it's a really great example. When we talk about connectivity, I'm also talking about, this hybrid world I think we'll live in henceforth, where those relationships can be online and offline. Really just thinking about putting those relationships first, deepening engagement with the staff, donors, volunteers that you have. Getting a sense of what have your audiences responded to during this time. We know that one thing the pandemic has illuminated is that we crave being connected. And so organizations are being called to invest time in knowing who's on the bus with you, right? I have a picture here from Proteus, Daniel Hoffman's and all, from their I'm Thankful for Farm Workers virtual event. And I know many of you have had to pivot and do virtual events over the past year. What we've seen is that in some cases, we've seen increased participation by offering something virtually. But I'm questioning what the long-term appetite is going to be for some of these kind of gala events to be held more virtually instead of in person, sort of once pandemic restrictions are lifted and people are more comfortable being out and about. I think, you'll have to figure out what can you really do in this emerging hybrid environment, because it's twice as much work to be able to offer both at the same time sometimes. And so really thinking through, which audiences are craving which kinds of experiences, getting to know them, ask them, investing time in that. And then offering perhaps an early morning virtual and a later evening in-person networking kind of event. I think we'll see a lot of organizations continue to be creative about how they're meeting that need. So lastly, I want to talk just a little bit about like what's inspiring me right now. Um, and we talk about it's long been said that hindsight is 2020. And if I'm the first person to make the hindsight is so 2020 joke with you this year, good for me because I think we'll be hearing it a lot. I think that one of the trends is that scenario planning might be the new strategic planning. So, in my job, I get to have lots of great conversations with nonprofit consultants around, what they're hearing the sector needs, what kind of expertise can we partner with them to present in our training programs. And one of the conversations that I had with Leslie Wright, who's out of Cedar Rapids area last week or the week before, was really this idea about nonprofits embracing, futurist thinking. And so, when I'm called to share trends or what's the future, I wanted to sort of pull back and do some research and thinking around how do we define that. So, really in reality, there is no set future out there, but there are numerous possibilities, which can be incredibly daunting or incredibly exciting, I guess, depending upon where you sit. And so, one of the things that I'd encourage you to think about, as we're thinking about trends, emerging practices, is how is your organization cultivating foresight, right? We all just lived through a year where we were scrambling to reinvent ourselves and our program delivery. And so, one of the lessons maybe coming out of this is how do you have a planning process for your organization that takes into account what has been historical change drivers in the past. Dig back into history, think about the ways that how your population has been served has changed over time. What inspired that? What inspired those changes? Were they pandemics or new innovations in technology, some other societal pressures? And then think about, really where you are in the present, and thinking about some of the change drivers that might be on the horizon for your organization. How can you get ahead of them? Envision all of these different potential futures that are out there and set, what's our aspiration, and what do we need in order to really get there? So taking everything we've learned from the past year, all of that work of reimagining, and really kind of forecasting out, so that you're not going to spend 2021 scrambling in the same way, or 2025 or 2030. I'm really investing in that process. Again, strategic planning types of initiatives are something that we support financially through our grant making programs. So that's another area we can get in touch. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to host Leslie and then Sarah Dixon from Iowa Primary Health Association. They work together on some scenario planning. So I'm hoping for the next community circle conversation. And once I get that confirmed, I can share with this group that they'll walk through a little bit of how they did that. I also mentioned at the beginning that nonprofits are messy, and that is a term that I stole from Joan Gary. So I don't know if there are any Joan Gary super fans in the house, but if you're looking at, what kind of podcasts can I be listening to so that I can stay up on nonprofit trends or what blogs to read, highly recommend her Nonprofits Are Messy podcast. I know there's an episode about AI and fundraising, if that caught your ear. That's where I pulled maybe one of the themes that I shared around sustainability earlier. So I have really been talking your ears off We started a few minutes early, so I have about 15 minutes, it looks like, left for questions. Really just wanted to give you the opportunity to open up and ask any questions of me here, and my contact information is on the screen. I know I've been able to have a personal relationship with many of you so far and look forward to meeting more of you one-on-one. So that's the bulk of my presentation, but really looking forward to taking questions or having a little bit of dialogue as to what you're noticing in your organization as you look to the future and what's emerging.
Hi, Brian. This is Claudia. I do have a question, and I think it may deal with the social justice and the advocating in a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Sometimes, nonprofits, we're always being so careful not to seem to be
Political.
one way or the other in a political spectrum.
Yeah.
But a lot of the social causes tend to land very, very strongly in a very particular side of the political spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that has been the challenge, at least for us, for Conmigo, for the board, to say,
Sure.
hey, we need to support this initiative. And then when we see we're supporting the initiative, it tends to be just, on one side. So
Mm-hmm.
how does nonprofit balance that
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that we are advocating for the cause and not the person?
Absolutely. Well, I think you illuminated a really good distinction there at the end of your question, Claudia, around promoting specific political candidates or versus advocating on issues. And so, you might look to an organization like LSI, for instance, who has a day on the Hill for advocacy. If there's a particular bill that might be impacting your organization, what kind of education can you do to educate, your community that you're serving, and how this is going to impact, you as an organization or their families, and then providing them with the tools to reach out and share a message really focused on, the impact of that piece of legislation versus, being seen as, pro Trump or pro Biden or anything along those lines, really, campaigning more for a candidate. So there are some really good toolkits too with United Way. I'd say this isn't my area of expertise, but Dave Stone at United Way would be a really great contact. And I know he would love, if you don't have a relationship with him, to have the voice of some of the Conmigo families. I think I can't see a video for some reason, it disappeared. So I think this is coming from Conmigo. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I know, we've hosted him and he's like, I need stories. That's what people respond to, right? Like thinking about more in terms of how do you empower people to tell their stories and how, this legislation might impact them versus, putting a bumper sticker for a particular candidate on the front door or something like that. I also had a community circle with Bethany Snyder, who is a local consultant who talked about advocacy. And I'm happy to include that in the follow-up, how you can do grassroots advocacy and why it's important. So I'll make a note for that for my follow-up materials to make sure I include that community circle. Excuse me.
And I just want to say thank you because yes, Conmigo Hispanic Educational Resources has been a recipient of both a COVID grant recently through the Community Foundation, and we also receive a capacity building fund that allowed us to have kind of like come together with the board and
Yeah.
understand more what our purpose as a board should be. And I think that now we're ready for when we have new board members, we can differentiate. Here's the bylaws, and here's our charter, and here's where we want to be.
That's awesome.
So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And that's a great reminder. I am going to pop into the chat our nonprofit trainings link. And maybe Maybe I will if my computer responds. I don't know, technology for me today, y'all. It has not been helpful. There are videos on our website that go over the basics of being an effective board member. We have 4 like 2-minute videos that were a lot like that Endow, Iowa video. They're illustrated, they're fun. They put a superhero in the fiduciary responsibility, so kind of user friendly because that can be a scary and dry topic for some. So I'd encourage you, if you're looking for board development resources, to lean into those and to contact me about strategic planning as well. So thanks.
Everybody wants to drop their emails or contact information into the chat too. I think that's all very helpful. A lot of us already know each other and have that information, but I think it's just great to have it out there in case connections can come from that.
Absolutely.
This has been incredibly helpful, Brianne. I had no idea that the Community Foundation did all of that. And it's just really awesome to know.
Yeah, we get confused with the Greater Des Moines Partnership a lot. So I know you guys are a chamber affiliate, but we really partner all the time with a partnership, and we're really that philanthropic engine for the community. So it's always great when I can share, what makes us unique and what's our real zone.
Yes. And this presentation is being recorded, so it will be archived, or Trish will put it on our YouTube channel, or however exactly that works after that. So I know we did start a little early. I was just so excited to get into the information. But I know a couple people joined us, a few minutes in. So if you missed the beginning part, that will be there for people to see. So.
Great. Well, I so appreciate the invitation to be with this group. And it looks like people are going to go out to the foundation website today. So thanks for visiting. And we really have such an open door policy. Angie and I are hugely conversational in how we do grant making and making connections with the community. So, I mentioned I'm looking forward to meeting with several of you in the future. And I know Jane and I have had the opportunity to connect more deeply. I've had a great time getting to know Amanda from Blank Park Zoo a little bit better through our community circles. And I just have to say, Blank Park Zoo, shout out as well on all the incredible things you have been doing to pivot. It was really cool to hear about the mini golf event and kind of leveraging the partnerships with the golf course. I mean, that's the kind of thing that our nonprofit community is doing left and right, and maybe not always getting the credit for. It takes amazing staff and board leadership to make those things happen. So way to go.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get out there and mini golf. I think that's going to be pretty awesome. Little family date this weekend.
Definitely do. Please do.
Yeah.
I see Jane's a question in the chat about the books I posted, resources available through the nonprofit library. Good question. I actually bought this one for Steps in the Future with my own money a couple weeks ago. So maybe I'll see if we can buy a nonprofit library version. Especially
You're
if we
on
have
the library board. Does the Des Moines Public Library have
what?
it?
They didn't have it. That's why I bought it. And I feel like I have reached my quota of emailing the library different books that I think they should buy. I do that all the time. So yeah, maybe I will recommend it, or
Brenda
look at
Hall is the
partnerships.
director of the Southside Library, and she is almost always on these calls. And of course,
Really?
is not this morning, so we cannot harass her about it. But if you were to email anyone, she would be the gal I would
She would
suggest.
be the gal. Okay, for my Southside Fuse crew, I will look into getting 4 Steps to the Future out to you. That would be great.
Thank you so much. Any final questions? All right, thank you. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of your Wednesday. And we will see you all next month, hopefully.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a great
you.
day.
You
Bye.
as well.
Have a great day. Bye, everybody. Congratulations, Laura.
Thank you. I appreciate it.